Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over some very important things you need to know if you're going to plan on leasing a car. And this video is not the one you want to go to for should I be leasing versus should I be buying, what's the best option. I made a completely separate video just for that topic, so I'll link it at the top so you can go watch that video first, and if you need to, come back and watch this video. Because this video is going to be more focused on you need to know this versus need to know that, or make sure you don't do that and make sure you do this. Because I want you guys to be fully equipped with knowledge so that when it does come time for you to lease, nobody takes advantage of you. So let's jump right in. The first thing you need to do is to make sure you're leasing the right car. And when I say the right car, I'm not talking about necessarily the car you want, but more the car that has a really strong residual value. And the residual value is how much the car is going to be worth once your lease is over. So you want that number to be as high as possible. And the reason for that is because your monthly payment will be based on the depreciation of the car. So the higher the residual value, the lower the depreciation. Here's an example of how that works. So let's say the car you want is worth $30,000. And at the end of your 3-year lease, it's expected that same car will be worth $20,000. That $20,000 represents the residual value of the car, and that $10,000 difference represents the depreciation. So your lease payment is designed to pay off that $10,000 of appreciation over that 3-year period. So that's how a lease works. Now let's say you have another car worth $30,000 also, but its residual value after 3 years is expected to be $25,000. So because the residual value is higher, your lease would only be based on paying off that $5,000 of depreciation over that 3-year period. So of course, this would lead to a smaller monthly payment. And this is why you want to lease a car that has a high residual value. So if the residual value for the car is less than 50% at the end of your lease, it's probably not going to be a good deal. That means the car will be worth less than half of what it is up front. And I'm basing this off of a 36-month lease. Now an excellent lease would be with a car that has a residual value of somewhere between 55 to 65%. And that number is based on the MSRP. And that's the manufacturer's suggested retail price. So here's a visual of how different residual values can actually affect your monthly payment. Here you see a car worth $30,000 and it has a 65% residual value. That means when the lease is over, the car will be worth $19,500. So you take that $30,000 and subtract that $19,500, and that gives you a depreciation of $10,500. So that's going to be the number that your lease payment is based off of. So if you divide that by 36 months, your lease payment will be $292 a month. Now if you look at this example, you also have a $30,000 car, but this one has a 40% residual value. So now the residual value is going to be $12,000. So you subtract that $12,000 from the $30,000, that gives you a depreciation amount of $18,000. So now you're paying for more depreciation. So because you're paying for more depreciation over that 3-year period, it's going to equal $500 a month. So you can see clearly how the more depreciation you have, the more monthly payment you're going to have. So you can clearly see the importance of leasing a car with a higher residual value. So to find out the residual value, you can either check online or you can call and ask a dealer directly. Next, you don't want to sell or trade in your current car to the future leasing company. It's not the end of the world if you do, but them knowing you have a trade-in, which is considered cash, just gives them the upper hand. You have to understand that you'll be dealing with professional number crunchers here, so you don't want to give them any additional information up front that can be used against you later. I would personally recommend that you just sell your car to a completely different dealer ahead of time just to be on the safe side. And get offers from at least 5 different dealers just to make sure you get the best price on your car as possible. Next thing I want you to know is that everything when it comes to a lease is completely negotiable. And even though you're leasing a car and not buying it, you still want to negotiate the sales price. And the reason for that is because the sales price is the starting point for all the other costs to come. So the lower you get the sales price, the lower you get all the other costs too. You can also negotiate the term of your lease. The most common term is a 36-month lease, but you still have the option to negotiate if you want more or you want less. And try to keep the term of your lease to equal a full year amount. So stick to 24, 36, or even 48 months. And the reason for that is because if you lease a car for 39 months, you still have to pay the registration for the full year, even though you'll only be actually driving the car for 3 months out of that final year. And this is something I see quite often. Next thing you can negotiate is the actual mileage, because there'll be a set number of miles you can drive that car every single year. And this is important because the over mileage fees are extremely excessive. So have an idea of how many miles that you usually drive a year. That way you're not going to put yourself in a compromising position. But the most common number you see will be 12,000 miles a year. Now another thing you can negotiate with your lease is the money factor. So you have to pay close attention to this part. This is the number used with the car lease to represent the interest rate. And just like interest rates are important in everything else that you purchase, you want to treat the money factor with the same respect. So the money factor would be a number that looks like this, 0.00235. So just by looking at that number, you have no clue if that rate is considered to be high or low. So I'm going to teach you a trick to turn that weird looking number into a comparable interest rate. Because once you see that number converted over to an interest rate, you can tell right away if that's a high interest rate or not. So you'll definitely need a calculator for this part. You're going to take that money factor and multiply it by 2,400. And when you do that, you can now see that you're being charged a 5.64% interest rate. And based on where interest rates are at the time, will help you determine if that's considered a good rate or a not good rate. And I'd even recommend you do that math right in front of the salesperson because it lets them know you have an idea of what's going on. Because respect goes a long way. And that can definitely help limit the amount of disrespectful numbers they plan on putting in front of you in the future. Next thing you want to do is get all your quotes with zero money down. Because once you start putting money down, it gets harder to determine if the actual deal is a good deal or not. And right from the start, you want everything as clear as possible. So another tip for you that will help you determine if this is a good deal or not is to get your quotes with no money down for 36 months and have them put $12,000 as the mileage. And make sure they include the taxes and all the fees. And from all that, you'll end up with a monthly payment amount. Now take that monthly payment amount and divide it by the MSRP. So let's say your monthly payment was $600 and the MSRP for that car was $54,000. When you do the math on that, you'll end up with 0.01. Then take that 0.01 and multiply it times 100. And then you'll end up with 1.1%. And you want that percentage number to fall within 1 to 1.5% to be classified as a good deal. And obviously the lower the better. And don't allow them to manipulate your monthly payments by extending your lease term further than what it already is. Now the next tip is pretty straightforward. And that's do not put a down payment down for your lease. It is not required at all. The number one thing to keep in mind is that putting money down does not lower your overall cost. And it doesn't save you money in the long run the same way it would if you had a loan. And if you were to make a down payment and that car got totaled from an accident or got stolen, you would not get any of that money back. And the amount you're paying for the lease is already predetermined, so putting more money down is not necessary at all. And while we're on the topic of accidents, make sure you have gap insurance. That's something else that's important but also gets overlooked. It used to always be included in leases, but not so much anymore. That covers the amount above what the insurance company would pay out in case of an accident. Because without gap insurance, you'd be personally responsible for paying out that difference to the leasing company. And I'm sure that's the last thing you want to do. Next, don't wait till the last minute to start shopping around for your options when your lease is almost over. I would say start planning somewhere between 6 to 12 months before the end of your lease. Because if you wait till the last minute, you can get a bad deal regardless of whatever your plans are with that car. Because you'll need that time to shop around from different dealers, especially if you're trying to get into a new lease. Because the more dealers you speak to, the better you increase your chances of getting a better deal versus just going with the first person you speak to. And because of everything you learned in this video, plus your personal experience with the lease you're currently in, you'll be in a really good position to even shop online. So you won't physically need to go from dealer to dealer anymore. But either way, don't wait till the last minute. Now for this next tip, this may be the most important tip of all of them. And that's if you plan on turning your car in at the end of your lease, don't just go to the dealer, drop the car off, and just leave. That might be the worst thing you can do. Because believe it or not, you may have equity in your car. And I know it's not usual that you hear people talking about you may have equity in your car, but that's a huge benefit that comes along with leasing. Because remember, when you started your lease, you were given a contractual residual value. And that value states how much your car will be worth when your lease is over. So at the end of your lease, you can actually purchase that car for that set amount directly from the dealer. Now here's how you use that to your advantage. Just because the residual value states what you can purchase the car for at that specific time, doesn't mean that's how much the car is actually worth in the open market. Because when you get a lease, the dealer is assuming the future value of that car. But markets change, and so does car value. So before turning in your car, make sure you check the Kelley Blue Book value of your car. And if the current value is more than the actual residual value given to you by the dealer, you can actually sell your car for that current value. And when I say sell your car, I'm not talking about driving around with a for sale sign in your window or something like that. I'm talking about selling the car directly to the dealer themselves and walking away with a check. Because otherwise, they would just pocket the equity themselves, which is what they do most of the time because most people have no clue about these details. So here's what that looks like. Let's use that same example of the car being worth $30,000 with an expected $20,000 residual value. over your 36-month lease, you would have paid off the $10,000 of depreciation. So before you go turn your car in, you actually check the Kelley Blue Book value and you see that your car is actually worth $23,000. You can literally sell the car directly to the dealer for that $23,000 price. So it would be as if you purchased the car for the $20,000 amount and immediately sold it to the dealer for the $23,000 amount. So when it's all said and done, you would literally walk away with a check for $3,000 directly from the dealer. And that's one of the most powerful tools about leasing. So that's a tip for if you plan on turning in your car, but I have a different tip if you plan on actually buying the car and keeping it for yourself. So if that's something you plan on doing, don't go back to the direct dealer you got the lease from, because they will do their best to add all kind of fees and probably jack up the price on you. So what you want to do is call the leasing company and ask for a direct payoff quote. And then you'll need to get financing from your bank or from your credit union and then pay the leasing company directly. This can save you a lot of headache and unnecessary fees. Now, if you're in a state that requires that you must go back to that same dealer, the workaround is that you can technically go to multiple dealers under the same manufacturer. So it still doesn't have to be that specific one you got the original lease from. But overall, just remember, when your lease is up, you have options. You can either buy the car, you can sell the car, you can trade in the car, or you can get a brand new lease. But now, regardless of whatever you plan on doing, you will be more equipped. So I hope this video was helpful. If you received any value at all, please leave a comment, even if it's like a little happy face or something. Because that's the only way YouTube knows this is an actual decent video, and it helps them decide if they're going to send it to more people or not. And I truly believe everyone leasing a car needs this information. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.